NFPA 70E Article 225.3 addresses circuit breaker testing. It states that circuit breakers that interrupt faults approaching their ratings shall be inspected and tested in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. This requirement is intended to ensure that circuit breakers are properly inspected and tested to verify their safe and reliable operation. Circuit breakers are critical safety devices that protect electrical systems from faults, and it is essential that they are maintained and tested to ensure their proper functioning. The manufacturer's instructions typically specify the frequency and type of testing that should be performed on circuit breakers. These instructions should be followed carefully to ensure that the circuit breakers are tested in a manner that is both effective and safe. There are several key points to consider. Firstly, circuit breakers that interrupt faults approaching their ratings must be inspected and tested. Secondly, the testing should be performed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Thirdly, proper testing ensures that circuit breakers are operating safely and reliably. It is crucial to understand the importance of circuit breaker testing within the context of electrical safety. Circuit breakers are designed to protect electrical equipment and personnel from overcurrents and short circuits. When a fault occurs, the circuit breaker is intended to trip, interrupting the flow of current and preventing damage or injury. However, if a circuit breaker is not functioning properly, it may fail to trip when a fault occurs, which can lead to serious consequences, including equipment damage, fire, and electrical shock. Regular inspection and testing of circuit breakers are essential to ensure that they are in good working order and capable of performing their intended function. The manufacturer's instructions provide detailed guidance on how to properly inspect and test circuit breakers. These instructions typically specify the frequency of testing, the types of tests that should be performed, and the procedures for performing the tests. It is important to follow the manufacturer's instructions carefully to ensure that the tests are performed correctly and that the results are accurate. There are several different types of tests that may be performed on circuit breakers, including visual inspection, insulation resistance testing, contact resistance testing, and trip testing. Visual inspection involves checking the circuit breaker for any signs of damage or wear, such as cracks, corrosion, or loose connections. Insulation resistance testing measures the resistance of the insulation between the circuit breaker's conductors and ground. This test can help to identify any weaknesses in the insulation that could lead to a short circuit. Contact resistance testing measures the resistance of the contacts within the circuit breaker. High contact resistance can cause the circuit breaker to overheat and fail. Trip testing involves verifying that the circuit breaker trips properly when subjected to an overcurrent or short circuit. This test can be performed using a test set that simulates a fault condition. The results of circuit breaker testing should be carefully documented and maintained. This documentation can be used to track the performance of the circuit breakers over time and to identify any potential problems. If a circuit breaker fails to pass any of the required tests, it should be repaired or replaced immediately. Failure to do so could put electrical equipment and personnel at risk. In addition to regular inspection and testing, it is also important to properly maintain circuit breakers. This includes keeping them clean and free of dust and debris, and ensuring that all connections are tight. Circuit breakers should also be lubricated periodically, as recommended by the manufacturer. Proper maintenance can help to extend the life of circuit breakers and improve their reliability. Understanding the importance of NFPA 70E and its requirements for circuit breaker testing is essential for electrical safety. By following the manufacturer's instructions and performing regular inspection and testing, it is possible to ensure that circuit breakers are operating safely and reliably, protecting electrical equipment and personnel from harm. Failure to properly maintain and test circuit breakers can have serious consequences, including equipment damage, fire, and electrical shock. Therefore, it is important to take circuit breaker testing seriously and to follow all applicable safety regulations and standards. Circuit breaker testing is not a one-time event, but rather an ongoing process that should be performed on a regular basis. The frequency of testing will depend on several factors, including the type of circuit breaker, the operating environment, and the manufacturer's recommendations. However, As a general rule, circuit breakers should be tested at least annually. In addition to regular testing, circuit breakers should also be inspected and tested whenever they are subjected to a fault condition. This is to ensure that the circuit breaker tripped properly and that it is still in good working order. If a circuit breaker has been subjected to a fault condition, it should be carefully inspected for any signs of damage before being put back into service. If any damage is found, the circuit breaker should be repaired or replaced immediately. Circuit breaker testing should only be performed by qualified personnel who have been properly trained in the procedures and safety precautions. It is important to use the correct tools and equipment and to follow all applicable safety regulations. When performing circuit breaker testing, it is important to wear appropriate personal protective equipment such as gloves, safety glasses, and hearing protection. It is also important to energize the circuit breaker before performing any testing. This can be done by opening the circuit breaker and locking it out. Once the circuit breaker has been de-energized, it is important to verify that it is indeed dead before proceeding with the testing. This can be done using a voltage tester. If the circuit breaker is not properly de-energized, there is a risk of electrical shock. In addition to following the manufacturer's instructions, it is also important to be aware of any applicable industry standards or regulations. For example, the National Electrical Code, or NEC, contains requirements for the installation and maintenance of circuit breakers. It is important to comply with all applicable requirements to ensure that the circuit breakers are installed and maintained in a safe and reliable manner. Circuit breakers are an essential part of any electrical system, and it is important to take the time to properly inspect, test, and maintain them. By following the guidelines outlined in this discussion, it is possible to ensure that circuit breakers are operating safely and reliably, protecting electrical equipment and personnel from harm. Remember that electrical safety is everyone's responsibility. By being aware of the hazards and taking the necessary precautions, it is possible to prevent accidents and injuries. Circuit breaker testing is an important part of electrical safety, and it should be performed on a regular basis by qualified personnel.